The SEC has changed. They've added 2 new programs in Oklahoma and Texas, and they've done away with the East and Western divisions. One thing that hasn't changed about the SEC, though, is unbelievable quarterback talent. Over the last decade or so, the SEC has really improved at the quarterback position, and that has not changed going into 2024. In today's video, we're going to preview and talk about the quarterbacks in the SEC. I'm going to rank them 1 through 16, give my thoughts on each and every one of them, and ultimately, you'll get to see who I think will be the best and who will be the worst. It'll probably all be wrong, and everyone will probably disagree, and be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Without further ado, be sure to also subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let me know what team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and rank the SEC quarterbacks 1 through 16. Okay, so at number 16, we have Diego Pavia / Nate Johnson. Right now, there isn't clarity as to whether Utah transfer Nate Johnson or New Mexico transfer Diego Pavia will win the starting job for Vanderbilt. We do know they lost both AJ Swan and Ken Seals, so one of those two will have to start. Nate Johnson's a little bit more raw, as he was a 4-star recruit and spent time at Utah, and Diego Pavia was under-recruited and is a little bit more rough around the edges, and someone who I think can get the job done better. Ultimately, I think Pavia is going to win the starting job, but it's going to be really hard for him to climb that list, as there's just so much talent in front of him, and it is so hard to win at Vanderbilt. Pavia is a decent player, but despite being the Conference USA Player of the Year in 2023, I have him ranked at number 16. At number 15, we have to go over to Starkville, Mississippi and talk about Blake Shapen. If I would have made this list a couple of years ago, I would say Blake Shapen would actually be middle of the pack. He showed a ridiculous amount of flash when he started that Big 12 championship game, but ever since then it has been disappointing. He's only a 3-star recruit coming out of Shreveport, Louisiana, but Shapen has just not been able to really figure it out. He hasn't been awful, but he hasn't been great either. He threw for 2,800 yards and 18 touchdowns in 2022, but last year he regressed in pretty much every category, as he only threw for 2,200 yards with 13 touchdowns. The one thing he did do was get better at turning the ball over, as he only had 3 picks instead of 10, but I also just don't really believe in Shapen yet. He will head into Jeff Lebby's offense, and there's a lot of potential there, but right now Shapen is way too much of a what if, and based on what I've seen in the past, right now I can't see a reason why I'd rank him any higher than number 15. He could prove me wrong though. We now get to our second tier of the rankings, and these are guys who have a lot of potential, but are relative unknowns or don't have that much experience yet. At number 14, we have Lenoris Sellers from South Carolina. South Carolina is in an interesting spot, as they're just coming off of Spencer Rattler, and Sellers is a guy who's just a redshirt freshman. Coming out of Florence, South Carolina, he was a late rising recruit in the class of 2023, as he went from a 3-star recruit to someone who became a 4-star and had a lot of potential. He ended up being the backup this past season, and he actually was really awesome. He only completed 4 passes, but 2 of them were touchdowns. He also had a 36-yard touchdown against Vanderbilt, and in a very small sample size, Sellers showed that he had a ridiculous amount of potential, and more importantly had the it factor. Because of how good the list is though, Lenoris Sellers finds himself at number 14, and he still has a lot to prove. Taylon Green is a really interesting story. Right now, he should be the starting quarterback at Arkansas this upcoming fall, and going back in time, he was a 3-star recruit out of Louisville, Texas. He ended up deciding to go to Boise State, and some people were calling him the next big thing. As a redshirt freshman at the Broncos in 2022, he threw for 2,000 yards and 14 touchdowns, and also had 600 yards and 10 scores on the ground. He was truly a dual-threat quarterback who was dynamite, and was considered the best returning quarterback in the Mountain West last year. Unfortunately, Green would struggle, as he only threw for 1,700 yards with 11 touchdowns and 9 picks, and then 9 more scores on the ground. Taylon Green decided to enter the transfer portal, and he actually got an opportunity to transfer up to Arkansas. They just lost KJ Jefferson, and Taylon Green should be the starting quarterback this upcoming fall, and to me, he's shown enough to be ranked at number 13, but there's a lot to wonder about him. Is he in the right system? Will he have a repeat of 2023, or did he just need a fresh new start? We'll find out pretty quickly, but for now, Taylon finds himself at number 13, and he's a guy who I think has a high ceiling. At number 12, we have Brock Vandagriff. You guys probably remember him, as coming out of Bogart, Georgia, Vandagriff was a 5-star recruit. He originally committed to Oklahoma, and he was actually Lincoln Riley's quarterback instead of Caleb Williams for a time. That's how good Brock was supposed to be, but he ended up flipping to Georgia, and so far his career has been extremely underwhelming. He threw 1 pass in 2021, 2 passes in 2022, and then 18 passes in 2023. Part of that was because of Stetson Bennett and Carson Beck being in front of him, but Vandagriff saw the writing on the wall and decided to transfer. He ended up at Kentucky, where he will now battle it out with Gavin Wimsatt, the Rutgers transfer, for the starting job. From all indications, Brock Vandagriff is going to be the guy for Mark Stoops, and to me this is a very interesting fit. While Vandagriff has pretty much no stats to his name, he has his 5-star status and the fact that he was in that Georgia quarterback room for 3 years to show me that he's worth being ranked this high. Kentucky's going to be really interesting this upcoming fall, and Brock Vandagriff has loads of potential, which is why I have him at number 13. At number 11, we have Peyton Thorne. We are now into the next tier of quarterbacks who in my eyes are established or have shown significant glimpse. Peyton Thorne is the guy I have first, and to be honest, I'm really not that high on him. I've sort of seen everything I need to see from Peyton Thorne over these last few years, as after he was a 3-star recruit coming out of Chicago, he spent 3 years at Michigan State. He ended up helping them have that breakout season in 2021, and that was his best year, as he had 31 combined touchdowns and nearly 3,500 combined yards. Thorne would regress a little bit in 2022 before he would transfer to Auburn. Him and Robbie Ashford split time in 2023, and Thorne struggled in my eyes. He only threw for 1,700 yards with 16 touchdowns and 10 picks, and just did not look comfortable. Whether the offense wasn't catered to him or his physical traits held him back, Peyton Thorne in my eyes is not the guy who's going to get Hugh Freeze over the hump, and we've already seen everything we need to see out of him. In my eyes, he's an average quarterback at best and doesn't have the insane athleticism or physical traits to really be a star in the SEC. He is established though, and Hugh Freeze is really high on him, so I have him ranked at number 11, but I think he's a guy who could easily fall down the list as well, or get replaced by Walker White or Holden Gariner by the end of the year. Similar to Peyton Thorne, I have Graham Mertz at number 10. The difference between the two of them, though, is that Graham Mertz actually has a lot of potential. After becoming a nearly 5-star recruit out of Overland Park, Kansas, Graham Mertz ended up going to Wisconsin and showed flash in his first game. Unfortunately, he could never quite figure it out while he was at Wisconsin, and his best year would come in 2022 with nearly 2,000 yards and 19 touchdowns. He then decided to transfer over to Florida for the 2023 season and became Billy Napier's starting quarterback. This past year, he threw for 2,900 yards with 20 touchdowns and 3 picks, and also had 4 scores on the ground. Looking at his numbers, he honestly wasn't that bad, and based on the situation that was going on at Florida, I actually have to give him a lot of credit. He was better than a lot of people thought, and some think he has NFL potential after this year. I kind of still want to wait and see with that, but the reason why I have Mertz ranked lower is because I don't really have a ton of faith in this offense, and the guys in front of him are just that much better. Mertz is a solid player with a high ceiling, but we'll see if he and the circumstances around him allow for him to become much better. At number 9, we have Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma. It's kind of weird saying that Oklahoma is in the SEC, but Arnold is going to be the guy. Coming out of Denton Guyer in Texas, Jackson Arnold was a 5-star recruit and one of the best quarterbacks in recent memory coming from Texas high school football. Arnold was honestly supposed to redshirt last year behind Dylan Gabriel, but he got a couple of opportunities to play. He ended up finishing with 5 total touchdowns, 563 yards, and 3 interceptions. He got an opportunity to start in their bowl game against Arizona, and in that game he was a mixed bag. While he did throw for 361 yards, he struggled with turnovers. The thing with Arnold, though, is that he has a ridiculous amount of potential, already showed flash last year, and I have a lot of faith in Brent Venables and what he's done with the quarterback position, so that's why I have him ranked at number 9. At number 8, we have Garrett Nussmeier. LSU has had a strong tradition at the quarterback position over the last few years, starting with Joe Burrow and then last year with Jaden Daniels. Both of those guys won the Heisman, and while I'm not saying Garrett Nussmeier will, I think he will have a good season. After becoming a 4-star recruit, Garrett Nussmeier has sat on the bench and waited his turn. He's played 3 years, and in his small sample sizes, he's shown that he can be great. Against one of the best defenses ever in Georgia, he picked them apart in the SEC championship game, and then last year in his start against Wisconsin, he threw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. Nussmeier's waited 3 years, he knows the system, has potential, works really hard, and LSU has a great tradition, so there's no reason to think that Nussmeier won't be next up. Again, I'm not going to say he's going to win the Heisman Trophy, but Nussmeier is going to be good, and I think he actually has potential to jump up into the top 5 by the end of the year if certain dominoes fall his way. At number 7 on the list, I have Nico Iamaleava. I hope I finally said his name right, but Nico has a lot of hype for Tennessee this upcoming fall. After becoming a superstar volleyball player, the long-haired Polynesian quarterback ended up becoming a 5-star recruit and the highest-rated quarterback to ever sign with the Vols. He ended up becoming a backup last year, but actually showed a ridiculous amount of potential in their bowl game. Playing against a really good Iowa defense, Nico ended up going 12 of 19 for 151 yards and a touchdown, and then had 3 more scores on the ground. He ended up showing that he can both throw the ball and run the ball, and I think that, combined with his insane measurables, makes Nico Iamaleava someone to really watch out for. While I still think he needs to gain experience, Nico's already sort of proven that he has that it factor, that he can do it all, and now he just needs to show it. The next guy we need to talk about is Connor Weigman. I have him ranked as the number 6 quarterback in the SEC, and I think it is for good reason. After becoming a 5-star recruit in the class of 2022, Weigman would take over towards the end of the 2022 season, throwing for 896 yards and 8 touchdowns without an interception. He had an extremely strong finish to 2022 and then had an impressive start to 2023 before he would go down with an injury. In just 4 games, Weigman ended up throwing for 979 yards and 8 touchdowns. That included a 5-touchdown performance against New Mexico and 3 touchdowns against Miami. While Weigman definitely needs to stay healthy and get more experience, I think he's the kind of guy who in Mike Elko's system could have a huge year, play his way into the first round of the draft, and there's nothing in my eyes that Weigman can't do. We'll just have to wait and see, but I'm really high on him, maybe a little unjustly, but I think he's the real deal, and I'm excited to watch him for the Aggies this year. Now we will get into the final tier of quarterbacks, who are the guys fighting to be number 1, who are super established, and have a chance to do big things. I legitimately cannot believe I'm saying this, but Brady Cook is the number 5 quarterback in the SEC. After becoming a 3-star recruit out of high school, he ended up becoming part of Elijah Drinkwitz' first recruiting class, and has done his time. He ended up starting their bowl game in 2021, and then was a really mixed bag in 2022. After throwing for 2,700 yards and 20 combined touchdowns, Brady Cook was seen as not good enough, and the fan base was ready to run him out of town, including myself. We just didn't believe he had what it took to be a star quarterback, but then in 2023, he broke out. Cook ended up throwing for 3,300 yards with 21 touchdowns, and then he also ran for 300 yards and 8 scores. Besides the good stats, he also completed 66% of his passes, limited his turnovers, led them to a ton of big wins, and more importantly, showed an insane amount of grit. Despite being injured, he helped them beat Kansas State, he played his way through grit, all the mud that was being thrown at him, and he made a ton of crucial plays, especially in that Ohio State and that Florida game. While Cook is not going to be a first-round draft pick, he's more on the top of the SEC because he's just a good college quarterback. I honestly don't really see him moving up from the 5th spot, but maybe he has a huge year and moves up into that top 4. For now though, I have him at number 5, and some people are even going to question that. Kind of similar to Brady Cook, I don't think a lot of people expected Jalen Milroe to be a top 4 quarterback. After he flipped from Texas to Alabama, the 4-star recruit was always being recruited over. Many expected 5-star recruit Ty Simpson to take his spot, and then when they brought in former 5-star Notre Dame transfer Tyler Buchner, everyone was just ready for Milroe to go away. After he had a rough start to the 2023 season, Milroe did figure it out. He ended up throwing for 2,800 yards with 23 touchdowns and also had 500 yards and 12 scores on the ground. Milroe proved he was a legitimate dual-threat quarterback, took on a leadership position, and got them to the college football playoff. While some are not sold on his arm or his NFL future, Milroe proved he deserves to be in the elite territory of SEC quarterbacks, has the potential to do so, and now the biggest question mark is how will he adapt in Kalen DeBoer's system? Will he have a Michael Penix type season, or will he crumble? We don't really know, but I think Milroe will figure it out. Maybe I could have made a 5th tier, and that is for the guys who could be first-round draft picks or legit Heisman contenders. The first guy we need to talk about is Jackson Dart. Coming out of the state of Utah, Dart was a top 100 recruit who signed alongside Miller Moss to be a part of USC. He was one of those Lincoln Riley quarterbacks, and after showing flash at the end of the 2021 season with 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns, Dart would transfer to Ole Miss, where he won the job in 2022. Following in the lead of Matt Corral, he became a star in 2022, throwing for nearly 3,000 yards and 21 touchdowns, but he did struggle with turnovers. This past year, Dart got even better, as this time he threw for 3,400 yards with 23 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions, and also ran for 8 scores on the ground. Dart proved that he was legit, and right now I see him as a first-round quarterback. He also has Heisman hype, Ole Miss has playoff hype, and the sky is the limit for him. I'm super pumped to watch him, and I think he deserves to be at number 3. Honestly, I debated between number 2 and number 3, but I ended up saying that Quinn Ewers is the second best quarterback in the SEC. After becoming a 5-star recruit and somewhat of a generational name, Quinn Ewers decided to sign with Ohio State, but just redshirted and did nothing in 2021. In 2022, he transferred over to Texas, where he threw for 2,100 yards and 15 touchdowns, and dealt with some on and off injury. Ewers has had a little bit of that, but in 2023, he started to put it all together, throwing for 3,500 yards with 22 touchdowns and 6 picks, and then 5 more scores on the ground. Ewers got Texas to the college football playoff, and decided to come back for one more year. Ewers can pretty much do everything, but this is going to be his legacy season. Can he get Texas to a national championship? We'll have to wait and see, but Ewers will be a first-round pick after this season's over, and he's a legitimate Heisman contender. Finally, some people are going to argue this, but I do think Carson Beck is the best quarterback in the SEC. Despite an offense that sometimes doesn't let quarterbacks put up huge numbers, Beck proved the world wrong last year. He threw for nearly 4,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, and only had 6 picks, and also ran for 4 more scores on the ground. Beck got off to somewhat of a slow start, but he really started to figure it out and put it all together by the end of the year. He also played really well against good competition, and right now Beck is seen as the best returning quarterback in college football, the likely #1 overall draft pick for 2025, and a guy who is hoping to lead Georgia to another national championship. While I could nitpick some parts of Beck's game, I think right now he is the best quarterback in the SEC, but I will say, I think Ewers and Dart have the potential to pass him. For now though, he is #1. Yeah, today we ranked all 16 starting quarterbacks in the SEC, and be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. What did I get right and wrong? What list should I do next? And what are your thoughts on the SEC in general? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.